View. On Monday of this week, we visited with our friend Sid Salter, political analyst, been around the state of Mississippi and elections for a long time, and felt like it was important to come back after the fact and talk a little bit about what we learned, what we saw. Sid, many thought that, and thank you for joining me again this morning, many thought that it was going to be days, that we might be to today or tomorrow before we knew the outcome of the election. Turned out not to be the case. By about 2 o'clock, maybe 1:30 Central Time on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, we knew that Donald Trump was going to be the next president.
That's true. I was one of them that thought we might be, Friday or Saturday before we had a result. And of course, I credit that to some of the state level reforms that went in after the 2020 election, but I think the technology is catching up. Early voting is having certainly an impact. But yeah, it was nice to get closer to the old model of at least knowing by noon the next day the general outcome of the election.
Yeah. There are a couple of groups that trended away from what traditionally they do. The Latino community seemed to vote in much larger numbers than they ever have for a Republican. The black male community gave more support to Donald Trump than traditionally they do to Republican candidates. And I talked about this earlier this morning. There is a projection of what the shift of electoral college votes is going to look like in 2030 following the next census. Texas is going to get more votes. Florida is going to get more votes. I don't think that's a shock to anybody. There is a massive Hispanic Latin community in both of those states. Is this a harbinger of things to come, or is this ability to hold on to this voting block solely dependent on Donald Trump following through on some of the things that he has talked about for those particular communities?
Well, I think we saw in this election a lot of anger from the voters about the economy, and certainly the high price of food, the high price of fuel. But I also think in the two groups you referenced, Hispanics and African Americans, I think some of the lean of the Democratic Party on cultural issues ran into some headwinds with those two groups. And, Democrats are find themselves in an odd position. In order to get the support of the East Coast and the West Coast, sort of the figures that were standing with Vice President Harris, the Hollywood set, that sort of thing. The positions on cultural issues run into a lot of opposition in the what was formerly called the flyover country. I think this election sort of reiterated that the people in the flyover country intended to have their say. And I think in the so-called blue wall states, that's the difference. Working class voters, along with bolstered numbers from Hispanic and African American men, really set the table for both parties to do some reconfiguring. I think the Republican Party has an opportunity before them to get away from sort of the banker chamber of commerce Republican Party and go to a more wide open sort of more blue collar Republican Party. Democrats are going to have to ask some really hard questions about whether they can continue to cater to the East Coast, West Coast values that don't play particularly well in Ohio and Kentucky and Mississippi and places like that.
Yeah. Western Pennsylvania. You know, it's really, there are a couple of things that you said there that really strike me. You talk about the flyover states having their say. It's interesting because there is a bit of an exodus going on the West Coast, especially from California. You got a lot of people that have left New York to go to Florida to live. And so leaving some of those East Coast, West Coast states to go to more of the heartland or the Southeast. Of course, there's the ongoing question of, okay, if you are leaving behind because you don't like the policies, are you bringing your politics with you so that the same policies that doomed where you were are going to end up in the new place, or are you simply leaving those policies and those politics largely behind?
You know, Richard, I'm an old political science major, and one of the foundational topics that we studied was the whole concept of realigning elections. I think in many ways this was a realigning election for both parties. And so, you know, does this realignment have legs? Can it go forward? That question won't be answered until we see the policies that are put in place. You know, Jimmy Carter had a unified government during his term, and you know, failed on many levels to be able to enact policies. Led to Ronald Reagan's win in 1980. Republicans have tended to have unified government, you know, control of Congress, control of the White House, more so than Democrats. And so we've got a little more historical experience to look at that. But I do think this was a realigning election, and it will continue to be so long as you know, you produce, and that's the burden now on the Republican across the board majority. The old saw about the dog chasing the bus. Well, you caught it. Now what are you going to do with it? And so that is a burden that President Trump and the leaders in both houses of Congress are going to have to contend with. You know, the one word that a lot of the national commentators, you know, kind of choked on using on election night was mandate. But these numbers make 312 electoral votes. I mean, what else can you call 100%. It other than a mandate? The White House,
the Senate, the House, and you win the popular vote. That's exactly what it is. So let's finish on this, Sid. We got a minute and a half left. This is the last public election Donald Trump will run, right? There is no question he has changed the Republican Party over the last 10 years in a way that it had not been changed in a really, really long time. What does the Republican Party look like post-Donald Trump 4 years from now?
That's an excellent question without a ready answer. And so I think the Trump organization will try to find someone they can anoint. I also think the rest of the party will be looking for what's new, what's next. I don't have a ready answer for that question. I do believe the Republican Party is going to be more blue collar, populated more by working people than at least the national press thought it was of late.
Sid, I had a dear friend who has followed politics for a really long time, has worked in D.C., and he said to me last week, he said, if Trump wins, J.D. Vance will be at a pancake breakfast in New Hampshire by Valentine's Day.
I don't think that assessment is far off of true.
No doubt. Sid, appreciate your time and your insight. It certainly was an interesting election cycle. I guess now we begin the countdown to Inauguration Day. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Rich.
Sid Salter, longtime political analyst in Mississippi, visiting with us on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. Couple of a bunch more things, right, actually, to get to in the final 45 minutes of the show. We're back with you after this.